to the new Haitian generation. I'm your host, Cassandra Oliver. Today, we are going to talk about mental health. With me is the owner of Restore Wellness, Rodina Messaju. Rodina, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We can't wait to learn about what you do, and especially when it comes to the Haitian community. Are you ready?
Yes. Oh, yes. I'm ready.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you have grown up thus far.
Yeah, so I am a native of South Florida. I was born and raised in Broward County, and I moved over to Port St. Lucie in high school, which I hated. You can't imagine, like, living in the city and then going to the boonies. But when I lived in Broward County, I was immersed in the Haitian community. My mom is a Haitian descent, and she moved over here, so I was the first one in my family to be born in America. And so really navigating through those waters as we're assimilating in the culture, but still being really connected to the Haitian community in South Florida. So
That is pretty cool. From St. Lucie County, how are you finding your family adjusting and working the Haitian culture to what you do now?
To me, being a therapist?
Yes.
Yes. So, I think at first they had no idea what a therapist was. And it was like, okay, they want you to do the three, being a doctor, being an engineer, being a lawyer. And so I was like, I don't really want to do those things, and so kind of had to figure out and navigate what are other options. Like if I don't want to do those three that, are typically advertised for us to do or promoted for us to do, and then it feels like anything else that you choose to do won't be supported. Right. It was tough trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But once I landed on social work and really decided for myself on setting my own path and not necessarily just going for what they wanted for me, as I learned more about what social work meant, what therapy means, what mental health means, which, I don't think we have much of a concept in our community, in the Haitian community. And so as I learn more for myself and as they see what I'm doing, then they are embracing it more. And I do say that they're proud of what I'm doing, but I still think they don't have a full concept of what that means.
And I could totally understand that means. What does it take to become a mental health professional? Tell us about your educational background.
Yeah, so I actually have my master's in social work. I'm a licensed clinical social worker through the state of Florida. And that takes you have to have a master's in any area of clinical work. So that could be in social work, that could be in marriage and family therapy, that could be in, there's mental health counselors, and there's also psychologists, right? So in any of those avenues, you can become what we call a psychotherapist, and then you have to do some postgraduate training where you're supervised by someone else. So you have to be supervised by someone who's licensed under the state of Florida's supervision. And you have to do a certain amount of hours. I think it's about 2,000 hours, clinical hours, that you have to engage in. It takes about, it could take at least 2 years. And I believe you have up to 5 years to finish all those clinical hours. You have to take a state board exam. And then you can become licensed. And, you can see clients when you're licensed or not. But once you are licensed, that's really like your stamp. And that's where insurances are willing to pay for having you being on their board, and that's when we can accept insurance. So that is really the span, but there's lots of trainings. That's just the bottom of it. So there's trainings in order for you to specialize. So, there's areas where if you want to work with trauma or eating disorder or substance use or marriage and family therapy, working with couples, all of those come with additional trainings that you have to keep up with.
And in your educational background, which part was your favorite of learning and doing the whole therapy gamut?
Yeah, so actually, I didn't want to be a therapist.
Really?
No, I didn't. I just thought it was like, I don't want to be sitting there listening to people talk about their problems all day.
Right.
Like, that did not sound fulfilling to me.
Okay.
But I really gravitated towards social work, and I love the systems that come into play. I love the variety. I love that they view people more than just their problems.
Okay.
They view them in their community. They view them in multiple roles. So that's in your culture. That's in the aspect of the country in itself. What are different systems that come into play, whether that's government, education, welfare or, religion, spirituality, personal interest, personality, trauma. All of these are coming into place, and we view people more than just, okay, you're dealing with some problems. We view them in what are some systematic things that are also playing into why this is showing up in your life. Wow. And so that's in policy work, what we call macro social work, viewing things at a broader perspective, and then the micro, which is more of like the direct services that you provide one-on-one or through an agency and things like that. So I love that you could work in so many different aspects. I know when people hear social work, they think of like a dependency case manager.
Exactly.
Someone who works in foster care
Right.
and may take away someone's kids, or just someone who manages that whole dependency system.
Right.
And that's really just one job.
Wow.
One aspect, one population. There's so many things that you could do. You can work in adoption, you can work in pregnancy, you can work in maternity mental health, you can work in trauma, you can work with children. And I love that there's such a wide variety, and you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into one thing. So for me with social work, I love being able to put together the community part of things and also the one-on-one intimate things that come into play.
How awesome is that? No one would have known unless, I'm glad you're here to explain to us, because that is one area in our community that we don't talk about, is the mental wealth and the mental health of us all, and how it's interdependent and everything that we do. So this is so needed, especially now with what's going on.
Absolutely. And I think just even in the Haitian community, we view systems as a threat. We view government and people who are in professional positions as a threat to our community and to our safety. And so I think it was also another part of being able to expand the language around social work, because it is a big support for communities. And so if it's constantly, especially in our community where they may not initiate services because of the fear or because of the threat or because of the distance, we really want to create a more inclusive way for us to view services and know that there's other Haitians who are in there and who speak Creole, who want to be part of the culture, so that you don't feel like, oh, I need to be completely American to be able to get some of these services.
That is worth knowing. That is definitely worth knowing. Tell us, how did Restore Wellness come about?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when I had to become a therapist, I didn't say I had to become a therapist because that was the only way to become a license in the state of Florida. You have to do clinical hours. So when I did therapy, I worked in a community-based agency. And I worked with kids, and I worked with kids who had experienced sexual trauma, sexual behavior. I worked in the schools. We worked with behavioral problems or just trauma in general, worked with parents, and I really had an affinity towards trauma, and particularly sexual trauma. But then I felt like I was pigeonholed in a sense with the agency to work with a certain population of what they got based off of the referrals from the community or from the schools. And I felt like I really wanted to connect with more women who look like me, and I wanted to connect with broader ranges of stories. I wanted to work with them on long term, and I really wanted to focus and hone in on working with women who have experienced sexual trauma. And so a lot of the work that I did with the agency was working with kids, and I really wanted to transition to working with women of color, working with Haitian Americans, and working with sexual trauma specifically, and really kind of, hone in on that niche. And so private practice became an area where I felt like I can put out what I wanted to. I couldn't pick what kind of client I wanted to work with at the agency. And so I felt like I had to be under the microscope of what they wanted, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like, what God has called me to do is unique and specific to me as a culture, me as a woman, and me even as having the experience of working with sexual trauma. So private practice allows you to choose that. It allows you to really open up your space and really create safe spaces for women to see themselves fully in what they're looking at with the company. So I would kind of consider myself a creative, and so I found that as like I had a blank canvas, and I could have women see themselves in mental health. I can have communities see themselves in mental health, and really work towards living fulfilled lives. So that's when I opened up Restore Wellness Counseling Center.
That is amazing. So you find that there is a need for what you're looking to do in our community.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Tell us more about how you see mental health reflected in the Haitian community and how you can best serve that need?
Yeah, you asked really great questions, Cassandra. I think that it's a huge need because there is not a formal concept in our community around mental health. I think when we look at, one of the things that is often talked about with being Haitian and hearing about it in this country is how poor it is. And with poverty, there's a lot of trauma that comes in that avenue. And I think there's definitely a lot of strengths that comes from our community. But then because there's not as much formality around child rearing, around how to deal with stress, around trauma, mainly around like just having to survive, it really create certain dynamics that are common in Caribbean families. And so that's where we'll see a lot of maybe living in fear that will build up anxiety, or there's silence. You don't talk about things. So then when sexual trauma does happen in your family, no one's talking about it. Or when trauma is occurring, we don't address it as a family. And so when we're not addressing it as a family and everyone's just kind of going through different things, you feel isolated and you're having to deal with everything on your own, and there's nowhere to feel that connection, that support to really work through it. And I think it's a great service for us to, one, be able to get services from someone who understands the depth of that culture and some of those dynamics that comes into play, having to assimilate into America as first generation, second generation, holding on to your culture that will have different beliefs or narratives around what life means, but also transitioning and assimilating to an American culture. And so I think holding on to multiple identities at once, the intersectionality of that really plays a huge role in just identity and mental health. So I think that's one, just as like the Haitian American, but then also for our parents who came into this country and coming in and really trying to survive and paint a better life, but having that generational tension. So all of those things really play out, and a lot of women who come in, which are mainly like the first generation, second generation Haitian American women, they're getting to talk through those dynamics with a therapist who is also Haitian American, who they can also talk in their language. So if they're spitting out, Creole or Creole-English, or talking from the perspective of their family members and saying it in the language that's used, they don't have to translate that. I could fully understand what that means. And then we could talk about the nuances of how trauma can be, or stress can be embedded into certain cultures or, dynamics. So it's a huge benefit to be able to see someone who's not only culturally competent, but also can relate to your specific ethnicity.
And I can only imagine that allows your clients to feel a whole level of comfort that wasn't there before, and the openness and the willingness to see someone that looks like them, identify and work with them to handle their needs.
Absolutely.
That is dynamic.
Yeah.
What services does Restore Wellness provide?
Yeah, so we provide individual counseling, family counseling, couples counseling, and we actually are just now starting our first group therapy. It's a process group. It's post-abortion recovery, and it's a faith-based group, and we are so excited about opening that one up because I think that's a topic that we don't talk about. People are experiencing it, and it's probably even been politicized in a sense, but not really looking at the people through empathy and being part of this process to hold on to like forgiveness and letting go of any shame or anything that's associated with that decision. So those are pretty much the services that we bring in. We really love to support women and girls as a whole. We do see children, adolescents, and adults, but our practice mainly supports women and girls.
That is awesome. At least they know there's someone out there to get the services that they're looking for.
Yes, absolutely.
Does your whole team work towards identifying these needs and presenting it to the community so they can get services? How do you translate that to our groups?
Yeah, so my team, I have two other therapists in the practice, and they have areas that they love to work with. I have another Haitian American therapist, and she loves to work with kids. So she sees our children and our adolescents, and she specifically likes to work with trauma, and she loves to work with the Haitian American generation as well, to work through some of those transition and working with the parents and having them understand what's going on with the kids. And so that's her passion. That's where she leads. needs. And I love the aspect of leading through passion. And so that's the same thing for the other therapist. She's Puerto Rican, but she's also passionate about supporting women in roles of, them as a wife or in maternity mental health, in abortion care. So I think we all lead in areas of passion. And with that really supports the niche, and that really supports our level of empathy and compassion that we provide to our clients.
What do you find is the biggest challenge for you in your work?
Yeah, the biggest challenge I would say is the stigma around mental health. And we all have stigma around mental health. Like it's a bias, right? We all have it. And I think the biggest thing is knowing that you need help and support and wanting that help and support to look a certain way. But if you need anything else, then we're resisting it or believing that there's a certain person who goes to therapy and not that therapy is for everyone. And I find that even when you take that step into coming into therapy, figuring out what therapy means, who to talk to support you through that process, and being able to stand out loudly and in the light around some of the work that you're doing, and having to deal with the people's beliefs and perceptions about your work in therapy. So I would say those are one of the challenges that comes into play.
Do you find now that with your line of work that there's more support globally because of what we're going through as a nation, as a community, down to the home sites? There's definitely more conversation around mental health nowadays. How's that supporting what you do in Restore Wellness?
Yeah, I think it's getting better.
That's a good thing.
I think it's getting better, but I definitely think there's still a lot of work to be done because in the conversations, it's always towards the extreme. It's the doctor who are dying by suicide, or it's the person who's experiencing psychosis, or it's the kids that are running loose and, doing all these things, and those are the ones who really need help, right? And so I think the language is still, if you're really struggling and if you can't function, you need to come to therapy, and not so much as like an optimal mental health wellness that we all need to look at.
Right.
We all need to work on our mental health, and it's not just, oh, you're really bad over there, so you're the one who needs it.
It shouldn't take the extreme.
No, it shouldn't. We should all be able to see ways that how our life experiences has shaped who we are today. And because we can acknowledge that we're not perfect, that means that there's areas of growth, right? And so really using therapy as that avenue to do that.
What drives you to be who you are?
That's a great question. I love that question, actually. I think first and foremost, my faith drives me to be who I am. I am a believer in Christ, and I believe even my practice is an avenue of serving my community and serving God. And because I believe that this is a calling that God has given me, that really drives the passion. And I think that's through my own life experiences that I get to pull from in my work and really think about, if it was me, what would I want? What would I want someone to be able to provide for me that I didn't get to have or experience? And I think that my faith in what I believe God has for me in my life pushes me through avenues even when I don't know what that would look like.
So your passion is definitely in your work.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
So where do you see your work going? Where's Restore Wellness going in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, so I called it Restore Wellness Counseling Center because I wanted to be a center. So I wanted to be a place where people can come and experience multiple services. Yeah. So right now we provide therapeutic services, but I'd love for us to provide restorative yoga, restorative meditation, maternity support, for all people. We're not just for women, but for the whole family. And I want it to be a place where if I have something going on that is going to benefit me therapeutically, I know that one place where I can get that as a family, right? We don't have to go to different places. And really where we can openly talk about trauma. We can openly talk about our life stressors. And I think in the Haitian community, that's definitely an area that we can grow in, you know, understanding legacy and understanding our generational stories. And are we sharing that? Are we sharing that with each other? And I think even as a Black community, that's been one one of our strengths is passing down
The
stories.
oral history, yes.
That's right. That's right, and originating all of that. And so I think if we can heal as a community, if we can come and create safe spaces as a community, we will be able to maintain a lot of that legacy with each other and not just move into different individual spaces and then we lose who we are as people.
So people can work with you in the long range for a center, but can they reach you virtually also?
Yeah, so right now we're only providing virtual therapy because of course we are in a global pandemic, and we plan to maintain being able to be accessible virtually. That is giving a lot of people flexibility and being able to initiate services in ways that maybe they haven't been able to do before. Because we're all virtual now, it feels more comfortable to do therapy virtually than people have been more accepting. So we're definitely seeing a hike in people initiating services. And right now we're in a mental health crisis. And so virtual is one way that allows us to be able to even expand all over the state of Florida. We don't just have to see someone who's close enough to our office. We can see someone who's all over the state.
How are you breaking down the barriers and the challenges for your clients to get the services and continue services even after they thought it was over? What do you do?
Yeah, so one of the barriers for them to initiate that is insurance, and so being able to credential and get onto insurance panels is definitely one way that we try to support that, providing sliding scale fee options for people who need that, because we know finances play a huge role in someone being able to initiate therapy. So we definitely want to provide some of that support, but also when we do have clients, working on your goals. Like therapy is something, and people don't associate therapy being goal-oriented, but it really is.
Tell us more about that. That is definitely, I don't associate it that way.
Yeah. So when you come in, and that's part of it, right? Because you remember I said, I didn't want to be a therapist because I don't want to hear about your problems all day.
Right.
So it's not just me hearing about your problems all day. It's me participating in a collaborative process with you. And you coming in and saying, this area I really want to see change in my life. Okay, well, let's facilitate that together. I'm here to support you. This is a non-judgmental, safe space. And I'm constantly goal setting and reviewing and making sure that my clients are getting out of services what they said that they wanted when they came in. Hey, what are you noticing? Are you seeing a change in your life? We're constantly checking in, and we're looking and we're reviewing. Like if I had a certain thought pattern and that thought pattern is still continuing, what do I need to adjust, or maybe I tried something and I need to do something else. So those are the goals that we set forth together. And my goal for people is really just to facilitate their process, right? And so you get out of therapy what you want to get out of it.
So there's an ownership for your client in their process.
Complete ownership, because it's your life, honey. It's your life. When you walk out of the office, you're the one living it.
Yes,
so it's really for you to own. And I love being part of that, encouraging women to own their stories, encouraging women to own their life, and not passively going about life and just feeling helpless. You can make a change. You can do something different even if you've never seen it done before.
Tell me, what would you consider to be your best achievement?
Ooh. In life, or just like
Absolutely in life.
Yeah, so I think for me, the first thing that comes up is my son. And, having a child at the age of 19 and just trying to manage between, the hopes and goals that your parent has for you when they come into this country and they want a different life, and pushing yourself to still meet that goal that you have for yourself, but also having this child to take care of. And so I think for me, being able to continue to meet my educational goals, my career goals, my professional goals, past what I ever thought, and feeling like I'm very present in my son's life. We have a positive attachment with each other, and I love him, and we're supportive, and we are in a great place together, and being intentional around even passing down the Haitian legacy for him. He's second generation now, so he doesn't speak Creole, which, whatever, because I'm like, you need to learn the language,
right? That's
and
part of it. That's definitely part of
so
it.
I think the other part of that, which is I'm very passionate about, like we go to Haiti often, he's been, a few times, is don't look at all the things that are wrong with it, right? Like, have an appreciation for the things that are right. Have an appreciation for the food, okay?
Oh, the food.
The food. Have an appreciation for the food and the culture and the love and the loudness that comes with it.
Yes.
I want him to see Haiti and being Haitian in my eyes, because for me, I think growing up in South Florida and being surrounded in my community, I didn't view myself outside of being Haitian. Like, I didn't find out I was Black until I got to college. You know, I was just Haitian.
Right.
So I really want that for him, and I want him to feel connected to the people who have done a lot of sacrifice for him before, and be proud of being Haitian, be proud of being an American, but be proud of being Haitian. And so really cultivating that in other generations as well.
If people wanted to contact you and learn more about Restore Wellness, how do we do that?
So you can find me at restorewellnesscounseling.com, and it's also Restore Wellness Counseling on Facebook and Instagram.
Oh, so you're on all platforms.
Not all of them, because I have to protect my space, so I can't be on all of them. But I am on Facebook, I am on Instagram, and Clubhouse. I just got on Clubhouse.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so very much.
Yeah.
You have been watching the new Haitian generation, where my guest has been Rodina Mesidou. Watch the new Haitian generation Thursday nights at 10 p.m. on Beacon TV. Bye for now. Thank you so much, Rodina.
It was a
for working
pleasure
with
being
us.
here.
This was awesome.
Yes.